What if everything we've been taught about getting older is wrong? What if aging isn't about decline, but about the most profound awakening of life? In the ancient Buddhist texts, there's a saying, "The autumn leaf that falls is more beautiful than the spring bud that blooms." Today, we'll explore 3 transformative Buddhist teachings that completely revolutionize how we experience the second half of life. These aren't just philosophical ideas, they're practical tools that can transform relationships, clear decades of emotional baggage, and reignite a passion for learning that many thought was lost forever. So settle in, dear friends, as we journey through ancient wisdom and modern truths that will forever change how you see aging. Part 1: The Student Who Never Stopped Learning. The Ancient Story. In the time of the Buddha, there lived an elderly man named Upali, who, at the age of 80, approached the monastery gates. The younger monks whispered among themselves, watching this bent figure slowly make his way up the path. "Why does this old man come here?" they murmured. "Surely his mind is too rigid to grasp the Dharma. His memory is too weak to retain the teachings." But Upali persisted. Day after day, he sat at the edge of the assembly, straining to hear every word, his weathered hands clasped in his lap, his eyes bright with curiosity despite their clouded appearance. One particularly hot afternoon, a young monk, barely able to hide his irritation, approached the old man. "Grandfather," he said, the term dripping with condescension rather than respect, "wouldn't you be more comfortable resting in the shade? These teachings are complex, requiring great mental agility. Perhaps they're meant for younger minds." Upali's face crinkled into a gentle smile. He looked up at the young monk with eyes that held decades of wisdom. "Young brother," he replied softly, "tell me, when does the river stop flowing toward the ocean?" The monk frowned, puzzled by this seemingly random question. "The river never stops flowing. And when does the tree stop reaching for sunlight?" "Well," the young monk shifted uncomfortably, "never, as long as it lives." "Then why?" Upali asked, his voice carrying the weight of profound understanding, "should a living being stop reaching for wisdom?" The Buddha, who had been observing this exchange from beneath the Bodhi tree, called Upali forward. The old man rose slowly, his joints protesting, but his spirit soaring. "This man," the Buddha announced to the assembly, his voice carrying across the courtyard, "understands something vital. The mind that believes it knows everything has stopped growing. But the mind that remains curious, regardless of age, is forever young." Within 1 year, just 1 year, that 80-year-old man became one of the most insightful disciples in the Sangha. The very same younger monks who had dismissed him now sought his counsel, amazed by the depth of his understanding and the freshness of his perspective. In a bustling city in the Pacific Northwest, there's a story unfolding that mirrors this ancient wisdom perfectly. Margaret, a 72-year-old widow, recently walked into her first day of coding boot camp. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as 20-somethings with energy drinks and laptops covered in stickers turned to stare. The silence was palpable, that particular kind of silence that speaks louder than words. Margaret took her seat, pulled out a brand new notebook, physical, not digital, and smiled at the room. "Good morning, everyone. I'm here to learn something new." The instructor, barely older than Margaret's grandchildren, stumbled over the welcome. The young students exchanged those looks, you know the ones. The "what's grandma doing here" glances, the barely suppressed smirks, the assumption that this would be a short-lived experiment. But here's where the story takes a beautiful turn. 3 months into the program, Margaret wasn't just keeping up, she had become the heart of the classroom. When younger students hit walls of frustration, when error messages seemed like personal attacks, when imposter syndrome crept in at 2 a.m., it was Margaret who reminded them, every error message on this screen is just the computer's way of teaching us. It's less frustrating than potty training toddlers, trust me. Her approach to problem solving was different. Where younger students would bang their heads against the same wall repeatedly, Margaret would step back, make tea, and approach from a completely different angle. 50 years of life taught me that sometimes the front door is locked because you're meant to find the window, she'd say. Both Upali and Margaret embody what the Buddha called beginner's mind, Shoshin in Zen Buddhism. This precious state of consciousness isn't about being a beginner, it's about maintaining the openness, the eagerness, the wonder of someone experiencing something for the first time. The Buddha taught, in the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind there are few. Let that sink in for a moment. How often do we close doors in our minds because we've decided we're too old, too set in our ways, or past our prime? These aren't truths, they're prisons we build for ourselves, bar by bar, excuse by excuse. The ancient texts tell us that the Buddha himself continued learning until his last breath. Even in his final moments, he was teaching and simultaneously learning from the responses of his disciples. He understood that the moment we stop learning, we stop living, we merely exist. Modern neuroscience has caught up to what Buddhist masters knew millennia ago. The brain remains plastic, capable of forming new neural pathways throughout our entire lives. Those who embrace new challenges, who maintain curiosity, show increased gray matter density, better memory retention, and lower rates of cognitive decline. But beyond the science, there's something more profound at work, the preservation of wonder. Part 2, the courage to choose your circle. The Buddha's own life provides us with one of the most challenging teachings about relationships. His cousin, Devdatta, was family, blood family. They had played together as children, shared meals, and celebrated festivals. But Devdatta harbored a darkness that grew with time. He became consumed with jealousy, making multiple attempts on the Buddha's life, trying to split the Sangha, and spreading poison wherever he walked. The disciples were deeply troubled. In ancient Indian culture, family bonds were sacred, unbreakable. Master, they asked, their voices heavy with confusion, how can you maintain peace when your own blood brings such suffering? How can you turn away from family? The Buddha's response revolutionized their understanding of relationships. Being born into the same family creates a connection, but it does not create an obligation to accept harm. Blood relation is a fact of birth. Choosing who deserves space in your life is an act of wisdom. He then shared a metaphor that still echoes through time. If you were walking and stepped on a thorn, would you leave it in your foot simply because it came from a tree you planted with your own hands? Or would you remove it to continue your journey without pain? The disciples fell silent, understanding dawning on their faces. The Buddha wasn't preaching cruelty or encouraging abandonment. He was teaching discernment, the wisdom to recognize that sometimes, the most compassionate act, for all involved, is to create loving distance. In a small town in the Midwest, Sarah, 58 years old, sat in her therapist's office, tears streaming down her face. She had just made the hardest decision of her life, going no contact with her mother. Everyone judges me, she whispered, her voice cracking. They say, she's your mother, she won't be around forever, you'll regret this. But they don't understand. For 58 years, every interaction has been a masterclass in manipulation. Every phone call leaves me feeling worthless. Every visit requires weeks to recover from. Sarah had tried everything: boundaries that were repeatedly violated, limited contact that always expanded, family therapy where her mother performed beautifully only to unleash hell the moment they left the office. Some relationships, Sarah was learning, are like trying to grow roses in poison soil. No matter how much love, water, and sunlight you provide, nothing healthy can grow. The turning point came during a meditation retreat in the mountains. The teacher, an elderly Buddhist nun, shared this teaching: you cannot pour from an empty cup. More importantly, you cannot fill a cup while someone is actively drilling holes in the bottom. That image, of desperately trying to fill a cup while someone drills holes, captured Sarah's entire relationship with her mother. She realized she'd spent decades trying to earn unconditional love through conditional performance, trying to heal someone who weaponized their wounds, trying to maintain a relationship that was slowly eroding her capacity for joy. 6 months after cutting contact, Sarah's life had transformed. She wasn't celebrating, there was deep grief, waves of it. But she was also discovering something remarkable: who she was without constant criticism. She was funny. She was creative. She was worthy of respect. These weren't new qualities, they had always been there, just buried under decades of emotional debris. The Buddha spoke of Kalyanamitata, spiritual friendship or noble friendship. He made a remarkable statement that challenged everything his culture believed: admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie is actually the whole of the holy life. Notice the careful choice of words. Not family relations. Not blood ties. But an admirable friendship. The qualifier changes everything. It suggests that not all connections are created equal, and more crucially, not all connections deserve equal space in our precious lives. Consider this: as we age, our energy becomes more valuable than gold. We don't have unlimited emotional resources. Every moment spent trying to revive dead relationships is a moment not spent nurturing those that could flourish. Every ounce of energy poured into toxic dynamics is energy stolen from joy, from peace, from growth. The Buddhist practice of metta, loving kindness, begins with a revolutionary premise: may I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I be free from suffering. It starts with I, not they. This isn't selfishness, it's wisdom. You cannot offer genuine love and compassion from a well that others have poisoned or drained dry. Part 3: The Art of Sacred Decluttering. A wandering monk traveled the ancient roads with only 3 possessions: his robe, worn thin from years of use, his walking stick, smooth from countless miles, and his begging bowl, simple and chipped. One day, he encountered a wealthy merchant whose caravan stretched as far as the eye could see, camels laden with silks, spices, gold, and treasures from distant lands. The merchant, observing the monk's serenity, was deeply puzzled. "How can you be happy with so little?" he asked, gesturing to his magnificent caravan. The monk smiled and responded with his own question: "How can you be happy with so much?" The merchant laughed, thinking the monk was joking. But seeing the genuine curiosity in the holy man's eyes, he stopped. "What do you mean? My possessions bring me comfort, security, status. The monk nodded thoughtfully. Every possession you own also owns a piece of your mind. You worry about protecting it, maintaining it, insuring it, and replacing it. Your treasures have become your chains, each one forged from fear of loss. I carry only what serves my journey. Everything else, I've learned to release. The merchant, disturbed by this wisdom, challenged him, but what about memories? What about sentimental value? My grandmother's necklace, my father's sword, are you saying we should forget our ancestors? The monk picked up his simple bowl, running his fingers along a crack that had been carefully repaired with tree resin. This bowl belonged to my teacher. When I eat from it, I remember his wisdom. But if it shattered tomorrow, his teachings would remain in my heart. The bowl is just clay and water. The memory, the gratitude, the love, these live in me, not in the object. In a suburban home outside Chicago, Robert, a 65-year-old retired teacher, stood in his hallway, unable to move, not metaphorically, but literally. Boxes lined both walls, creating a narrow pathway. Every room told the same story: his children's artwork from kindergarten, his children now in their 40s with children of their own, yearbooks from high school, his parents' furniture that didn't match anything but couldn't be discarded, clothes from when he was 3 sizes smaller, gadgets that promised to change his life but only changed his credit card balance. This isn't living, Robert realized one morning, trying to find his coffee maker among the chaos. This is being curated by the past. Inspired by Buddhist teachings on non-attachment, Robert began what he called the Great Unburdening. But he didn't start with trash bags and donation boxes. He started with meditation, sitting among his possessions and observing his mind's reaction to the thought of releasing each item. The patterns were fascinating. Some objects triggered fear. What if I need this someday? Others triggered guilt. Aunt Mary gave me this before she died. Still others triggered a strange form of hope. When I lose weight, this will fit again. Robert developed a practice. Each day, he would hold one object and ask himself 3 questions. 1. Does this serve my present life? 2. Am I keeping this out of love or fear? 3. Would releasing this create space for something better? The first week was agony. His mind created elaborate justifications for keeping everything. But slowly, something shifted. He found his son's first baseball glove buried under newspapers from 1987. He'd been preserving this memory so carefully that he'd forgotten it existed. Instead of keeping the glove to gather more dust, he wrote his son a letter about that first Little League game, took a photo, and donated the glove to a youth program where it could create new memories. But physical decluttering, as profound as it can be, is merely the entrance to a deeper practice. The Buddha taught about sanskara, mental formations, the psychological and emotional patterns we accumulate and carry through life like invisible luggage. In a meditation center in California, Jennifer, a 70-year-old woman, had a revelation that shook her to her core. During a silent retreat, she realized she was still carrying her father's criticism from when she was 12 years old. He had told her she was too sensitive and would never amount to anything because of it. For 58 years, she had been trying to prove him wrong. Every achievement, every hardened response to emotional situations, every time she swallowed her tears and forced a smile, she was responding to a ghost. Her father had been dead for 20 years, but his words lived on, redecorating her mental landscape daily. Through meditation and gentle inquiry, Jennifer began the process of releasing these ancient wounds. Not to forget, the experiences had shaped her, taught her, even strengthened her in some ways. But to stop carrying them as active burdens. As the Thai forest master Ajahn Chah beautifully said, if you let go a little, you will have a little peace. If you let go a lot, you will have a lot of peace. If you let go completely, you will have complete peace. In Buddhism, emptiness, sunyata, isn't about nothingness or void. It's about potential, possibility, the pregnant pause before creation. When we clear physical and emotional clutter, we're not creating absence, we're creating presence. 6 months after Robert began his great unburdening, his home was transformed. The hallway where he once squeezed through boxes now held a single table with fresh flowers. His living room, previously a storage unit, had become a sanctuary. One comfortable chair, a meditation cushion, a single piece of art that genuinely brought him joy, and abundant natural light streaming through windows no longer blocked by stuff. I can breathe here now, Robert discovered. But more than that, I can think clearly. I can hear my own thoughts without the constant visual noise of 10,000 objects screaming for attention. The Buddha compared the cluttered mind to muddy water in a bowl. When you keep stirring it, adding more possessions, more stories, more grievances, the water stays murky. But when you stop stirring, when you stop adding and start releasing, the mud settles. The water becomes clear. You can finally see through to the bottom, to your true nature that was always there, just obscured. The integration, where all three teachings meet. The symphony of transformation. These three teachings, embracing lifelong learning, choosing nourishing relationships, and releasing clutter, aren't separate practices. There are three movements in the same symphony of awakening, each note supporting and amplifying the others. When physical and emotional clutter is released, the mind has space to learn. When toxic relationships are lovingly released, energy is freed for growth. When we embrace learning, we naturally let go of outdated beliefs and patterns that no longer serve us. In a meditation center in Vermont, there lives an 82-year-old woman named Martha who embodies this integration beautifully. After her husband's death, she made 3 radical decisions that transformed her remaining years into her most vibrant ones. First, she sold their large family home and moved into a small apartment near the library. Everyone thought I was crazy, Martha shares with visitors. But I realized I was maintaining rooms full of memories while life was happening outside. Second, she joined a philosophy discussion group that met weekly. The youngest member was 22, the oldest was Martha. My brain feels like it's doing yoga, she laughs. Stretching in directions I forgot existed. Third, she made the difficult decision to limit contact with her hypercritical sister while deepening friendships with supportive neighbors. Blood makes you related, Martha says wisely. Loyalty, respect, and kindness make you family. The result? I'm less alone in my small apartment than I ever was in that big house. When you clear out what doesn't serve you, you finally have room for what does. My mind is clearer at 82 than it was at 42. And honestly, I'm having more fun too. The Buddhist blueprint for aging. The Buddha aged. This simple fact carries profound meaning. He didn't transcend physical aging, didn't promise his followers eternal youth, didn't teach that enlightenment meant escaping the natural cycles of life. Instead, he demonstrated that aging itself could be a spiritual practice, a continuous opportunity for awakening. He taught, of all footprints, that of the elephant is supreme. Similarly, of all meditative themes, that on death is supreme. This isn't morbid, it's motivating. When we truly understand our mortality, not as a distant concept but as a present reality, every moment becomes precious, every choice becomes intentional. The three practices explored today are essentially about making conscious choices about how we use our finite time, limited energy, and precious attention. They're about recognizing that aging isn't something that happens to us, it's something we actively participate in, shape, and can even celebrate. As this journey of exploration draws to a close, consider this your invitation to begin. Not tomorrow, not next week, but today. Right now. Choose one area to start. If you choose learning, this week, explore something entirely new. It could be as simple as watching a documentary about a topic you know nothing about, trying to write with your non-dominant hand, or learning 3 words in a language you've never spoken. The subject doesn't matter, the act of beginning does. If you choose relationships, take an honest inventory. List the 5 people you interact with most frequently. Next to each name, simply notice, don't judge, whether time with them generally leaves you feeling energized or depleted. Awareness is the first step to conscious choice. If you choose decluttering, start with 1 drawer. Just 1. As you touch each object, practice the 3 questions. Don't pressure yourself to discard anything. Simply practice the art of conscious consideration. The Buddha's last words still echo through time, all composite things pass away. Strive for your own liberation with diligence. He didn't say, accept your fate. He didn't say, resign yourself to decline. He said, strive. Until the last breath, we have the capacity to grow, to choose, to release, to awaken. There's a beautiful Zen story. A student asked the master, how long will it take me to gain enlightenment? The master replied, 10 years. The student, disappointed, asked, what if I work really, really hard? The master smiled, then 20 years. The message is clear, this isn't about rushing or achieving. It's about embracing the journey itself. Every day you're alive is another opportunity to learn something new, to choose love over obligation, to release what no longer serves. Remember this truth. You are not too old to change. You are not too set in your ways to grow. You are not obligated to carry every burden you've accumulated. You have the power to choose what stays and what goes, in your home, in your heart, in your head. As the Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron reminds us, you are the sky. Everything else is just the weather. The storms of toxic relationships, the clouds of clutter, the fog of believing you're too old to learn, these are just weather patterns passing through the vast sky of your consciousness. They will pass. You, the sky, remain. If these words have stirred something within you, consider joining our growing community here at Buddha Coha. Subscribe to this channel, not merely for more videos, but to become part of a modern Sangha, a community of souls who understand that the spiritual journey has no expiration date. Hit the notification bell to join us for future explorations. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to begin again. And please, leave a comment below sharing which of these 3 teachings speaks most deeply to you. Your insight might be exactly what another seeker needs to hear today. Remember, every Buddha was once simply someone who decided to wake up. Your awakening doesn't depend on your age, your past, or your circumstances. It depends only on your willingness to begin. Until we meet again, may you walk gently on this earth. May you choose connections that nourish your soul. May you release what no longer serves you. And may you never, ever stop learning. This is Buddha Coha, reminding you that enlightenment isn't a destination you arrive at, it's a way of traveling, available to you in this very moment, regardless of the number of candles on your birthday cake. Namaste.